Hello everyone, and it's Sakiziel here, and today I'll be reacting to Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K Episode 45 The Light Flares by AFanWithTooMuchTime. And I highly recommend checking out, but if you're not doing so already, AFanWithTooMuchTime puts a lot of work into writing this. I honestly find it very impressive that he's done 45 episodes of this, and how long each one is like the both the quality and length of these is just stunning to me. And you should also definitely check out his original works, because he has I believe it was like either a comic or a full-on book, one of them. But without further ado, let's see what's happening in the war. I'm hoping that we get to see what's gonna happen with Omega and the others aboard the ship now that Eversor Assassin is in there, which, yeah, having Ghost Rider's coked up cousin on a ship with you is it is not good for your life expectancy. Not to mention the fact that Dawn of the Minions. Oh, for those who don't know, just by the by, yeah, with Eversor Assassins, killing one is not the end of it, because they usually have a bomb implanted in them, to make sure that if they go down, they're taking everything around them with them.
"Hold still, Heck," said the Inquisitor, one hand wrapped firmly around Hecate's chin and lower jaw, the other holding up a pen-like object which was rapidly flashing blue from one end. Hecate, who was sitting awkwardly on the side of the medical bed Samael had been occupying earlier, fidgeted and gnashed her teeth, her face creased with furious lines as she glared up at the blue light.
"Doesn't like being touched,"
Hecate growled through her openly clenched teeth. Samael frowned, holding the blinking blue beam of light steady on her right red eye. He could not help but notice that shifting her face back from third was becoming more difficult each time it occurred. An existential issue, given that Hecate could not exist for prolonged periods in her third face. Not without causing extensive damage to herself and anyone or thing too close to her. He lamented that she was becoming stronger to her own detriment, and his mimetic ploys would only work for so much longer if he did not figure something else out.
"Yeah? Well, I wouldn't have to if you would just hold still, Heck,"
Samael growled right back.
"Just deal with it for a few more seconds,"
the Inquisitor ordered.
Don't like it. Don't.
She continued growling before...
By the way, is it just me, or does Samael, with this AI generated image they use for him, look kind of like the Punisher? I don't know. But, also I'm guessing that saying that Hecate has multiple personalities that she flips between, and one of those is when she just needs to go murder mode on everything.
Trailing off, starting to relax. Samael sighed in frank relief as the change back into her first face finally triggered. Her internal augmentations winding down, most of her mangled mind being resubmerged in the warm void of her mimetic training. It was not long after this that her luminous red eyes began to slowly change, first diluting into a light purple color, and then into a bright, shiny blue as the nanoparticulates within her irises returned to clinging to her nerve centers, recharging themselves on her.
Oh, wait, nanoparticulates. Oh, so then is she, what do you call it again? Was it Calidus Assassin? Those are the shape-shifting ones?
Her bioelectrical energy. She frowned and crossed her arms, staring into the light more steadily now, and once he determined that she was calm enough, the Inquisitor released her chin, Hecate puffing a long sigh from her nose, just as he did. I do not understand why any of this procedure is necessary. The woman seems more like a liability than an asset, remarked Tempestor Prime Cinder, who stood not far behind, all three of them yet lingering within Ishtara's shrine.
What she seems to you is none of my concern.
Yeah, also considering how she handled herself when Samael was fighting Mace Windu and Obi-Wan. Yeah, I say that she's very handy to have around, despite her, shall we say, eccentricities, dangerous as they may be based on what has been said.
And understanding why this must be done is none of your concern. Do you have it?
Samael snapped, a heated spike rising in his chest. Cinder nodded, face expressionless, as he stepped forward and withdrew a gray bag composed of a tightly packed plastic. It had little white
Wait, is this gonna be more candy?
star designs across its exterior, and Cinder tossed it with one hand towards the large form of Samael. Yes, Inquisitor, the Prime said as he did. Samael snatched it out of the air without looking back at either the bag or Cinder himself. Taking it with his now free hand, he flashed the blue light into Hecate's other eye, and when he was reassured that she was not going to slide back into her third face as soon as he turned around, he deactivated the small light and stowed it, tearing open the plastic pack and fishing out a wrapped, circular lump of hardened processed sugar, ice blue in color, and mounted on the end of a tightly rolled paper straw.
Here.
Oh, lollipops. I guess... You know, earlier when she was munching on all that candy, I didn't think all that much of it.
Samael said, flicking it from his hand to her. Despite having shifted to her first face, Hecate still snatched the lollipop he had flicked at her out of the air with a speed Samael could not naturally match, tearing the plastic sheath from the head of the candy and stuffing it behind one cheek in the blink of an eye. Her frown became an impishly delighted smile, and Samael, satisfied, stood up and took a deep breath, subduing the sudden wave of anxiety that struck him. The nervous and nearly fearful burst was not born of the situation which surrounded him. After all, he still had two potent agents on the outside, waiting for his signal. When the...
Oh? I wonder if one of those is that Eversor assassin. But if not, I wonder if they're going to be anything like how effective Heck has shown herself to be. Which the idea of having three of them running around on Axum, it's gonna be a fun time. Not for the Republic.
The Inquisitor decided the time was right. He and Hecate would break out of this place and vanish into Axum's planet-wide hive. And from there, he would work out a way to rejoin his forces. He was also not nervous about the Exterminatus weapon that had been supposedly dropped onto Axum, for he would know by now if it had succeeded in detonating, and it obviously had not. What made Samael feel these emotions was something hidden from him. But he strongly suspected that they were a direct result of his new mechanical heart. Unlike a natural heart, his new eternal muscles did not beat or clench like his old ones had. Instead, his new heart hummed continuously in his chest, filtering his blood and pumping it mechanically and smoothly at a perfectly even pace throughout his body. Had he only one heart, this may have been able to neutralize most of his ability to even feel anxiety. But being that he had two hearts, his second was available and willing to hammer and speed in his chest, sensing the disturbance, as did so many other internal systems of his body. At least, this was what he attributed this all to as he hastily withdrew a glow stick from his jacket and lit it with one of his many spare lighters. He took a deep drag and exhaled it slowly.
But how many spare lighters does Samael have, I wonder? There. I personally like to imagine this, Jin, that since he just said many, but not with any indication of how many, that he probably just has like a closet full of lighters, or just pulls open his jacket, and instead of watches, it's just lighters.
Savoring the effect. The glow stick itself was far, far too mild to have any actual power over him, given his mostly Astartes biology. But, just like Hecate, he had programmed himself with a myriad of corrective mimetic treatments, and this was by far his most used. As he tasted the soot and smoke of the oily burning weed of the glow stick, associations and Pavlovian pathways awoke within his mind, triggering the alterations he had hypnotized into his subconscious. The pain in his body, not just from the recent operation, but from his very nature, began to dissolve and vanish from his conscious thoughts, replaced by the heady taste and smell of the cigarette between his fingers.
You know, that's actually a pretty smart way to go about things, because unlike the Space Wolves, who normal alcohol does absolutely nothing for them, so they make a chemical cocktail that is just outright deadly to normal humans, and because that's what it requires to get an Astartes drunk. He's just kind of, well, essentially implanted a sort of like suggestions within his own mind, and lighting up a cigarette is just the trigger for it to start what sounds like like just nostalgia waves, is where he gets to I suppose was relive the sensations from before he was augmented, from when a cigarette would actually have any sort of effect on him. Which now that it doesn't, I suppose it's mostly just a harmless thing, because with his physiology just filtering out what all the tar and everything from, then yeah, there's probably no downsides to him smoking.
He leaned against the wall, resting his head in his hand and taking another long drag as he did, sighing smoke as relief began to circulate through his mutant body. "Inquisitor Weiler?" asked a man's voice, a voice that did not belong to Cinder. Samael turned his head slightly to look towards the entrance of the room, and standing there was the shape of Saint Lazarus. The man seemed almost timid, despite his vestments and armor and, of course, his soldier's bearing. Samael recognized that reaction well, sighing and dragging on his glow stick one more time, burning it nearly down to the stump, before flicking the rest away into a brazier and turning to fully face the new saint. "Approach, Saint Lazarus," said the Inquisitor, instantly noting how Lazarus, untensed, particularly with his title being spoken and thus affirmed. "We have made a decision on the ceasefire," the saint said, a tension flowing beneath his words that suggested to Wyler that they were not merely settling with the safe option of martyrs' deaths. "You have decided to attend the ceasefire negotiation," Samael guessed, though his voice stated it as though it were a fact, almost an accusation. And the former sergeant made Major tensed once more and nearly stepped back. "How did you—" Lazarus began to say. "It is your place to lead the faithful, St. Lazarus. It is my place to know them," the Inquisitor claimed with all the certainty and graveness of a man who was not bluffing, and the saint nodded, momentarily awed and reminded of the power of the Inquisition. With that, Samael recalled how unexpectedly easy it was to convince nearly anyone that he was an all-knowing agent of the throne. All he needed to do was offer a ploy, a trick, a petty contrivance or twist of phrase, and the reputation of the organization did the rest. But, of course, Samael was far from that, and his follow-up, spoken so naturally as to hide its hypocrisy, was the subtle evidence of that. "Explain yourself then, Saint. Tell me, in your own words, why you think this is the right decision," Samael said, using a dangerous but neutral voice, a voice which suggested much, but promised nothing. Straightening like a rod as the intended effect of the ploy struck him, Lazarus began to cautiously but firmly explain his plan, his reasoning, and his need for Samael himself, and the Inquisitor had to admit he was intrigued.
Oh, back to the space battle. Although I am wondering what Lazarus's plan is regarding that meetup.
Demons! Damn demons!
The Lord Admiral bellowed, eyes wide and filled with the semblance of fire, a reflection of her own burning ships, discharging their rending weapons to the void, each surrounded by a shimmering shoal of Republic ships.
Have shield fleets Primaris and Secundus merge into one force and provide interdiction cover for the born on death! Now!
Rolus Endurance screamed from her command throne, her left hand rapidly typing away at her armrest-mounted input console. Her head ached terribly, her internal mental cogitators forcibly splitting her mind into as many simultaneous processes as she could manage. Hands and voice struggling to send out enough orders to counteract her numerous foes. The effort made the lines on her face tighten and deepen, and her rage spark all the brighter as she suffered through the effects needed to keep pace. Though she was unsure she could even say that much. The enemy were fighting her almost like Tyranids would, the swarms of arrowhead escorts acting like a single large entity more often than not, immune to routing or intimidation, without being able to drive the enemy off or manipulate their crowd psychology, and with the Republic being so openly willing to eat any losses as long as it meant keeping her pressed and suffocating, Rolo was being corralled down to a battle of raw angles and numbers, and forcing her into inevitable positions that were gradually wearing everything down.
Target their swarm clusters and switch to area munitions immediately! Battleship Master of Stars, you are to take lead of the frontal assault!
She tapped out with her hard, artificial fingers. Her eyes moved back up to the hololithic displays, glossy orbs reflecting the ill portents being projected there, each displayed in green luminescence that flickered with each shake and rumble of her besieged ship. Orla's eyes flicked down to the console at her left then, scanning it, reading each line in a flash as more responses came in.
Understood, my Lord Admiral. Master of Stars, now engaging the front with full battery macro salvos.
This is the Resplendent Doom reporting. We are sustaining heavy fire from multiple vectors. Their coordination is unprecedented. Our maneuvering thrusters are crippled. We cannot contend for much longer without support.
The Lord Admiral of the Zektek sector grit her teeth, nostrils flaring as she absorbed the reports.
Acknowledged, Captain Valicator. Contacting nearby cruisers. I need concentrated fire over the Resplendent Doom's sunward flank. Break their encirclement by giving the Doom a wall to grind them against.
By the way, I find it rather ironic in a way, actually, that because the Imperium is the one coming to the Star Wars galaxy with only a limited force, that they don't have the overwhelming numbers advantage. Is that people normally like to bring up when you know, like regarding the strength of the Imperium and the fact that the Imperial Guard, due to all the many worlds they have and how many soldiers they produce, could in many cases just drown the enemy in trillions upon trillions of men.
On death! Support the Resplendent Doom's sunless flank! Scatter them!
The Lord Admiral sent rapidly, and all the while, transmissions around her bombarded her with even more, her eyes bobbing up and swiveling. With reluctance, she shunted off a quarter of the reports to her sub-commanders, letting them sort and handle whatever may come from them, having strict orders to only send back reports that needed her absolute attention. She would have wanted to trust them with these tasks more as the void raged around them, but doing so cost her time, and she was dancing on seconds as it was. No time could be spared. A man appeared then. Not a real man, but the reflection of one, a hololith manifesting right before her eyes.
Gorst reporting. Vengeance class cruiser moving to answer the call. The swarms will break. Give us 30 seconds.
Reported the hazy, emerald phantom of Admiral Gorst. Rolla nodded, eyes moving up past him and looking into the other hololiths and the void beyond them. Out in the burning black, through the blistering displays of flashing lights and murdered metal of every variety, the vast, grand cruiser known as the Resplendent Doom was being lit ablaze. Its colossal body surrounded on all sides by persistent Republic arrowheads and clouds of strike craft. The breaking behemoth moaned inaudibly into the vacuum of space, bleeding from a million glowing cuts as the Republic wolves at all sides brayed for its death in continued colored streams and bolts of superheated plasma. Then, like a wall of light, or the very hand of the cosmic emperor of mankind himself, a stream of energy and munitions composed of macro cannons and lance discharges lit space like a divine river of resplendent death, nearly scorching the side of the Resplendent Doom and eradicating every Republic ship on that flank. The Doom did not miss a beat, barely functioning retro thrusters and maneuvering jets spitting and coughing to life, beginning to move the Imperial battleship into a leisurely twirl, spinning and dragging the Republic vessels which had invisibly anchored themselves to it via tractor beams. Those too slow or inept to disengage found themselves torn to pieces in the obliterating wall of Imperial support fire. And yet, escape proved more difficult than even those quick
Group of ships anchoring themselves to the battleship with tractor beams. He was getting hauled along its it's like in those shows when someone, for example, like it's like if someone were to say a try to lasso Superman, and then he just grabs rope and pulls them to him instead.
Reflexes could compensate for, something which was revealed as the Republic ships which had managed to avoid this fate fell victim to one just as hideous, finding themselves targeted by various weapons under the command of Admiral Gorst. The grim man smiled from the darkened, sparking bridge of his own flagship, scarred face cut with his subtle, gleaming grin. Every murdered Republic arrowhead fed him like a beast built and bred on the death of tens of thousands. Yet, only moments later, that grin died, along with the Admiral who had borne it. Multiple Y-wing attack bombers had converged on him, quick engines and small shapes appearing as if from nowhere. Proton torpedoes struck, overwhelming already weakened void shields and collapsing the canopy of Gorst's bridge. The Breaker of Heretics survived its own decapitation, but only physically. Now drifting, a dead body in the void, a prison for 100,000 screaming souls. Back on board Rola's ship, the green ghost of the grinning Admiral vanished, snuffed like a candle in the dark, never again to be lit. Contact with Admiral Gorst has been lost, reported one of the communications officers. The Lord Admiral grit her teeth, rage seizing in her chest, tears of anger gathering in her eyes. For she could not take a moment to mourn, not even to slam her fist in anger against her chair. She could do nothing but continue issuing orders, continue to stumble after this collapse of an assault, continue to pray to the God Emperor for some escape from this downward spiral. And less than 15 minutes from the end of her hour, Rola's prayers were answered in the voice of the machine god. Flickering to life as suddenly as Gorst had been taken from it, a new, massive hololith appeared before her, swallowing her view and dominating it with the insectoid lensed face of Archmagos Lesat Gamma.
Archmagos?
Rola began to say, but barely got the word out before the binaural drone of the venerable tech priest filled the room.
Central Command Juncture located. Certainty at 87.7%. Raising communications interdiction at location in 250 seconds.
He communicated to her across the bridge, Vox Howlers. Many cringed and winced at the harsh stream of sound, but the expression on Rola's sweat-streaked face was anything but pained, a white grin slicing across her otherwise grim features.
Send me the coordinates for this Central Command Juncture.
Rola ordered the Archmagos, even as her eyes slid away and landed on her communications officer.
Oh? I wonder if actually, like, if this segment takes place is before or like the events of the last episode, but then we're seeing what led up to the Eversor assassin being sent aboard. Also, from a moment there, when the tech priest mentioned showing up, I was honestly wondering if it was going to be a case where when Arch Mechanicus was going to end up lending support. But then again, that'd be a very dangerous investment to make in the battle, considering that while an Arch Mechanicus is a massive and powerful vessel and would more than likely have a Nova cannon on it, it's also one of the anchor points of the Imperial force, and they can't afford to lose one because that thing has research facilities, these manufacturing facilities. Basically, like, it is at the moment, like the Arch Mechanicuses that they have, however many they are basically their entire industrial and research base.
Get me a secure line! Full priority channel to the murder-class cruiser Vengeful Sun! Go!
She snapped, the officer turning down to his console and beginning the process of doing as she had ordered.
Coordinates are sent.
The huge, holographic tech priest murmured in his logic tongue, and not a second later, the communications officer raised a thumbs up. The Vengeful Sun is on Vox. Connection is secure, he reported.
Good. You have my thanks, Archmagos.
Rolla said before pressing a key on her control console that dismissed his image before he could even respond. The inhuman shape of the tech priest replaced by the far more recognizable form of Captain Samson Lucenter. Tall, darkly dressed and wearing black shaded glasses over his missing and now bionic eyes. The holographic captain watched her from...
Something about him just makes me think if you crossed Keanu Reeves with Hugh Jackman, because this guy to me looks like a cross between Johnny Silverhand and Wolverine.
Beneath the brim of his sharp naval cap. Lord Admiral, he said simply, standing somewhat at attention but offering no more honors than that.
Captain Lucenter, I have you on a completely secure line. No one outside of my bridge or yours can hear or see anything we are discussing.
Rolla said quickly.
An interesting thing to mention,
responded the captain, undaunted and unchanged.
I mention it, Captain, because I am distinctly aware of the fact that you are either working for the Inquisition or you are a direct member of it.
Snapped the Lord Admiral.
Lord Admiral Sindurin, I do not know,
the captain began, as casually as reciting a well-rehearsed script. But Rolla was not contacting him to hear auditions for a play.
I am also aware of the fact that your murder-class cruiser is the fastest cruiser in the Zektek sector. And rest assured, Captain, that I do not for even a single second believe that this is a coincidence.
Rolla pressed on.
And why, theoretically, would any of that be relevant to you, Lord Admiral?
He asked, tilting his head to the side ever so slightly.
It is relevant because I just got the coordinates of the Central Intelligence that the Republic is using to facilitate its fleet actions. Coordinates I am sending now,
she told him, turning to the side and nodding to her comms officer, who nodded back and sent them. A second later, Captain Lucenter tilted his own head, looking away from the Lord Admiral briefly, studying something on his own ship before his eyes returned to her, and he nodded.
It is in the Emperor's hands now, Lord Rolla. Faith is rewarded,
he responded enigmatically.
And the Emperor protects,
Rolla concluded. He nodded again before vanishing.
The Emperor protects.
Huh. So I was right. It was a precursor, or to show us leading up to when the Eversor got dispatched.
Lazarus found him standing outside, staring up into the sky with a hollow expression. The saint sighed heavily, feeling the emotional weight of yet another burden settle onto the space of his shoulders. "Forgive me, soldier," he thought to himself, gritting his teeth behind tight lips and moving forward to stand beside the recently interrogated guardsman. Varnus did not seem to notice, arms limp at his side as he stared up at the dying hues of the sky, letting some light in through the empty portals of his colorless eyes. Small shocks of white poked out from the sloppy mane of his unkempt hair, which rustled gently in the wind, his helmet held limply in his left hand. A telling, dire breath from Varnus revealed to Lazarus that the young man was aware of his presence, but, for whatever reasons still existed in his slowly mending mind, the Vestellan irregular said nothing, did not even move his eyes away from the empty fixed point in the white and blue sky above them, save for the subtle trembling which possessed each of his eyes. Subtle though it was, Lazarus noticed it, and knew it for what it was. The smallest surface ripple on a storm of broken psyche which was likely spinning and hastily reassembling itself. Time was needed for those things to settle down. Time was needed for healing to fully take place. But time was not a commodity that Lazarus had in any great amount. Relying more on instinct than experience, the recently sainted sergeant placed a firm metal hand onto Farnes's shoulder, squeezing it, and by that grounding the younger man. "You lost nearly your whole squad," Lazarus stated, another sharp breath hissing into Farnes's lungs. "You watched your sergeant die, took wounds, took losses. And at the end of it, the Republic went so far as to crash a void ship on top of you. You had to endure capture, endure the capture of your comrade, endure the shame and pain of helplessness. And then, after making it out of all of that, after arriving back with us, you again were forced through another extremely trying struggle." The saint continued, hand firm on the soldier's shoulder. "I could have spared you from it, but I had to be sure. And for that necessity, I am sorry," Lazarus admitted, and he meant it too. For a moment, the effects of his words seemed muted. But then, Farnes broke the trend, looking at Lazarus and shaking his head. "No," said the young man. Lazarus quirked his eyebrows. "No," he parroted. "No, I... Farnes mumbled, seeming to mentally stumble for a few moments before beginning to regain his footing. "That isn't... What I mean to say, sir, is that I understand. I understand why that had to happen." He finally managed to explain, though the explanation did little for Lazarus. The new saint squinted his eyes at the younger man, still seeing in him something that his voiced acceptance did not signal. Shaking his head, Lazarus squeezed the guardsman's shoulder with his metal hand one more time. "I'll make sure this wasn't for nothing. I'll get us out of here. Mankind must suffer, so that," Lazarus began to say, "so that we can survive," Farnes finished for him. "I know that. I made a promise to a comrade, a vow. I swore that there were things which I saw her do, things which I would not repeat. Heresies to the machine cult, but not sins in the eyes of the God Emperor," he explained, his eyes still distant, still hollow in their distinct way. "She was strong enough to do the impossible, and all she asked of me is that I keep her secret, and I couldn't even do that. I failed my vow, and now, even if we do get her back, she may be interrogated like I was, or executed for what she managed to do, or worse." Lazarus watched Farnes silently as he spoke, pieces slowly clicking into place as he remembered the Magos' sudden change in demeanor, and her insistence that he do what the Republic asked in order to retrieve Nerva Sharp. Was it possible that she was being retrieved only to be destroyed? Odd as it was, Lazarus knew better than to put such a possibility beyond the capacity or schemes of the Adeptus Mechanicus.
Or retreat so they can make her a princeps.
He shook his head. "You are coming with us," Lazarus stated, the words shocking Farnes from his torpor and prompting him to swing his head back to fully stare at the saint. "What?" Farnes stuttered. "You heard me, soldier. This whole operation is only happening because of you, so you are going to see it through. In fact, I can't think of anyone better to supervise the prisoner exchange, and to ensure they're taken care of once retrieved," Lazarus said, firming his jaw. "But why?" Farnes began to ask, only to be cut off by the saint in a pointed way. "Are you questioning my command, Guardsman Eliton?" Lazarus asked, expression lining with a scowl as his sergeant's demeanor consumed him for a brief instant. Farnes remembered himself all at once and snapped back to old instincts. He saluted and shook his head.
No, sir!
He said loudly. Good. Then tell me this and tell me straight. If I give you the authority and force to do so, do you think you could stand against the insistence of a tech priest Magos fervently enough to keep all of the prisoners safe while they are in my custody? Asked the Imperial Saint. Farnes barely hesitated as the meaning behind it all sank in. Face turning rosy as his expression set into a determined affirmation, he nodded sharply.
Sir, yes I can, sir!
Was his response. Good. That is what the Emperor needs to hear from his shield and hammer.
So is he going to be running interference to distract the Magos so they can actually get Nerva somewhere safe and potentially out of reach of the Mechanicus? Although then again, I'm not sure how well that would work. I'm curious what the plan is here, though.
Give me one moment, said Saint Lazarus, turning away and withdrawing a vox bead from his pocket, placing it into his ear before beginning to speak again. Prime, are you available? Good. Meet me just outside the front. And bring Velix with you, he said, speaking through the bead. Shortly thereafter, Tempestor Prime Cinder emerged from the basilica, another soldier in tow, a woman who, despite her prim uniform and precise military bearing, had no weapon, not even a sidearm. She had bright blonde hair, which she kept short and out of her vision, tucked under a stormtrooper's beret, and light brown eyes beneath it all. They both stopped before the saint and saluted just as sharply as Farnes had. At ease, he said, waving their salutes down. Velix, Lazarus added, fixing the woman with a hard stare.
Saint Lazarus,
she said in return, holding her hands behind her back and her feet wide in a parade rest. Lazarus noted that she was not using any of his military titles, and more than that, the former captain seemed perfectly professional, neither too at ease nor too rigid, her eyes filled with neither loyalty nor hostility, merely obedience. Will you take my orders? The former sergeant asked firmly. Her answer came as a sharp nod. Good. Private Eliton here is going to be in charge of the prisoner exchange, and afterwards I am delegating the task of safeguarding them to him. You are to aid him in these endeavors, and any others he requests for the duration of his assignment, or until otherwise noted by myself or Tempestor Prime Cinder.
Oh, so actually having Tempesta Scions under his command temporarily. Yeah. That's more direct than I thought it'd be.
Is that directive clear? Lazarus asked, treating her like a rank private standing in his squad line. She took it in stride, nodding sharply once more.
Crystal clear, sir,
she voiced as she did. Outstanding. Go now and begin preparing yourself and Private Eliton for this task. Make sure you have the required force needed to keep all returned prisoners within our custody, even from an ally force. The saint concluded, Sheriff Velix nodding again, saluting, and then turning towards Farnes, who stood at their side. He seemed quite shocked by what he had just observed, but was not given a lot of time to reflect on it.
Let us go. We must prepare an escort force and medical team,
said Shara, and, flinching somewhat, Farnes nodded.
Right, yeah, after you,
the guardsman said, and together they departed back into the basilica. Lazarus and Cinder watched them leave for a few moments before Cinder turned his head to look at the other man, though he said nothing, waiting for orders or for a dismissal. Prime Cinder, how is the contingency coming along? Asked Lazarus, eyes still fixed on the back of the two departing soldiers.
Contingency? I assume this is in the off chance that either A, negotiations with the Republic break down, or B, the possibility that turns out to be a trap set to decapitate their leadership.
We have very few men, Cinder replied. On top of that, most of our heavy fire support was crushed under the Republic Void ship when it landed. He went on. But not your fleet of Tarok's troop transports, right? Lazarus pressed, and Cinder grimaced, but shook his head. No, most of them are still intact and within the Basilica walls, Cinder confirmed. And, with only the few hundred men that we have, We should be able to load them all up, right? The saint went on, and again, Cinder was forced to acquiesce with a nod. Then it will have to do, said Lazarus with a sigh, rubbing his eyes.
There is no guarantee that this will work.
Cinder reminded the saint, and the former sergeant nodded. There never is, he groaned. But we have to punish them. Lazarus added, his back straightening and expression firming, drawing his hand away from his face. We have to ensure that if they do betray us, if they do try to trick us when we deal with them in good faith, that they either die or live to deeply regret it.
And I think I'll stop here and continue, the reaction in a part 2. Ooh. So far, this has been quite fun to watch, as always. And I'm looking forward to continuing. I hope you all enjoyed watching with me. And until next time, tata, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.